Well, I do just want to speak from my heart for a little bit and try to be succinct so that you guys can get to the valuable thing, which I believe is speaking with each other in this space and leaning into the practice that I think is so valuable that we've cultivated in our rhythm gathering together. I first just want to acknowledge that this month has been in some ways joyful as a community, together on retreat in a microchurch, but in so many ways horrific. And it does not feel right to scoot on by this and not continue to create space to engage and lean in. I also want to just name that it's heavy in a word. There's lots of words for that: grief, fear, anger, confusion, and exhaustion that I feel in talking with you, that I share with you, that I see in your faces. And sometimes that's a good tired, because you leaned into these moments in very important ways. And it's a tired and fatigue that comes along with this feeling of, I just want to live my life. I want to raise my kids. I want to enjoy the company of others. But that is not the time fully that we live in. And there comes with an exhaustion of that. And that is normal. And you expressing that and lamenting that and sharing that burden with others is normal. I also just want to express extreme pride in what our little community has been able to do in response. Both through discussions with you all and working alongside you all, I am privy to watching you love your neighbors in the way of Jesus in profound ways in this last month. And I'm very proud. I also, increasingly over the last few weeks in conversation with you and just engaging with my own heart, want to acknowledge a growing but something that's always been there, and that is a deeper fissure or distance between my understanding and engagement with the kingdom of God and the government and the reality, the civil life that we live in. And that just needs to be named. There's been seasons throughout my 37-year-old life where that hasn't been the case. It has in some ways, but it has deepened fully. And I'm personally just speaking, one of the things that I carry is growing up in a context that's been very loving, very kind to me, but real frankly has fused itself in many ways to a political reality. It's been very jarring, and I've heard that from you all. And it's confusing to grow up in a context, and I'm speaking personally here, where there has been allegiance to Jesus, and then there seems to be in practice a higher allegiance to a certain power in our life. And that's challenging. I think on the whole, I've heard you articulate in very important ways the core question that always should be our discipleship question. How do we as Christians, as kingdom people, respond? How do we lean into the times that are in front of us? And there is much to be said in response to that question. It is varied and different for each of us. And that's why it's important to keep coming to these tables, to keep having these discussions. I firmly believe in what we do in this little gathering actually is one of the best responses to that question, because we need each other to answer that question. We need to challenge each other. We need to invite each other into what it means to live as a faithful witness today. So I've seen you protest. I've seen you scramble and text to fix immigrants' furnaces. I've seen you gather kids, share know your right stuff. I've seen you thoughtfully engage online to challenge your social networks. I've heard about hard and tough conversations that you've had with relatives who disagree with you, with neighbors who disagree with you, and so much more. And it brings so much pride. I want to, if I can, just name something in this moment that we're in that I perceive as two dangers and potentially two solutions that I want to infuse in our community going forward. And these two dangers and two solutions primarily come from my meditation on the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who is both theologian and teacher. In its own, the work that he has done is a terrific resource to Christians across time. But the context in which Dietrich Bonhoeffer lived speaks volumes as well. He was a German pastor and theologian in the time of the Third Reich. And there's more to be said about his story, but I think he gives great witness. And you might disagree with the application of his perspective in our current moment. That's okay to disagree. I forget who said it, I think it was Mark Twain, but it's true. History doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I think there's a lot of rhyming going on between Dietrich's situation and what Christians who are authentically asking the question, how do I respond, are asking. And so the two dangers that he articulated, maybe not fully, but with his life, that have been summarized. The first is sequential complicity. And what he means by this is that the Christians in German time or other times where there was large humanitarian crises didn't decide to be complicit overnight. It was often long years of small decisions and small growing social pressures that led to inaction and regret. I don't want that for us. I'll be the first to say that I don't like conflict. I don't like tension. God didn't gift me with the skills to just lean in and be like, let's work this out. I'm very Scandinavian side hug type, okay? But that's not an excuse. And I'm not trying to be overly alarmist. I'm trying to be wise. I'm trying to be clear. And what I hope for this community is that we can name the danger of sequential complicity and be aware of it and invite each other lovingly and challenge each other in it. I'm trying to. Let me give you an image and then a quote from Dietrich himself. The image is about frogs. Maybe you've heard this image before. There's this old saying that says, if you put a frog in hot water, they're going to jump out immediately. But if you put a frog in room temperature and slowly bring up the temperature, they will actually just stay in there and perish. That's sequential complicity in a nutshell. It's actually not scientifically true. Frogs actually just will jump out when it gets too hot. It's been for humans in this instance that we're talking about, not so much. History has proven. We tend to stay in the water because the pressure gets too high to jump out. This is what Dietrich said in so many ways to articulate this reality or to fight against it. He said, Christianity stands or falls with its revolutionary protest against violence, arbitrariness, and pride of power, and with its plea for the weak. Christians are doing too little to make these points clear rather than too much. Christendom adjusts itself too easily to the worship of power. Christians should give more offense, shock the world far more than they're doing right now. Christians should take a stronger stand in favor of the weak rather than considering first the possible right of the strong. You might bristle at this, and that's okay. You might agree, and that's what community is about. The second danger I want to bring out is also a term from Bonhoeffer, and that's sociological stupidity. And he didn't mean intellectual stupidity. He didn't mean people are dumb. People are quite intelligent. What he meant by sociological stupidity is that because of sequential complicity, we can come to a sort of stupefied state where we are so frozen by all of the social forces around us. Maybe you felt this. If I post this, if I have this conversation with someone, if I come out in this way, what about this side? And it is thoughtful, but it puts us into paralysis. And I know this from personal experience. Sociological stupidity. So I want to be a community that actively works against these forces that I think are the enemy's top tool belts sometimes. And I know we can make mistakes. I know we can offend. I know we can get it wrong. But I would rather do those things trying and acting. So what are the solutions for this? What are the antidotes for this? I want to just give you two that I think our community has some strength in. The first is independence. And I don't mean declaration of independence. What I mean in psychological terms might be self-differentiation. And what I mean by this is that the call of the Christian in these contexts, I believe, is to be self in relationship to the political environment that's happening. And it is very important that we resist the temptation to totally detach or totally fuse ourselves with one political perspective or movement. And I don't think that gets us off the hook. That means that we need to engage and engage well, but we need to maintain our identity in Jesus. And how we do that, and I hope that you've heard this from this community, is to keep our focus on the kingdom, to keep our perspective on where is the kingdom emerging near me and how do I respond. That's something that our community does super well. That means that at points we will be in alignment with a certain political party. We will be maybe protesting along others who have a particular political view, but we always need to, my call and my urge is to maintain our kingdom and independence.
Yeah.
And what that means is that we elevate the lordship of Jesus and engagement in the kingdom over our allegiance to those different political realities.
Yeah.
And we need Jesus and our allegiance to him to be the change agent, our change theory in the midst of that engagement. So engage, have the discussions, do the things you're doing, and do so with self-differentiation and kingdom independence. The second thing, this is really fascinating from that period in history. When you look at Dietrich's life and look at what he did a number of things, but one of the things he did is have lunch. He ate with people and read and discussed around the table. And historians have looked back and said, what made the difference for people who were engaged in these moments and people who weren't? And often there was a relational link. There was a link of human connection and empathy that unlocked some level of empathy necessary to re-achieve that kingdom independence. And what resulted was this quiet, secret, underground kingdom rebellion of hiding Jews, giving supplies, that was not publicized, but was relationally interconnected. And that began in some part around tables. And here's where I think North City's story has a lot of strength to offer. We somehow have been a community that can disagree with each other, who can have good, spirited conversations about the world that we're encountering in our everyday life, and stay relationally connected. Stay committed to the gospel, the kingdom of God, and stay relationally connected, and also extend that relational connection. I have a book in my bag right now titled Subversive Meals. And it is a historical look at the early Christian church that ate together in subversive ways in the context where there was persecution and all sorts of other problems that we don't necessarily deal with. And I want to submit to you, our meals can be subversive and subtle in that way. When we create this space to be with one another, to be in relationship with one another, and work through these things. There's my heart to discuss it with you guys. I want to shift now and invite you to discuss